Whoa, that was weird. Today, we're talking about Daniel, dreams, and wisdom from God. Let's get started.
What's up, icKids? Last week we talked about Daniel following God's way, and we watched that and we talked about it, and I hope this week that you got to kind of think about that before you were, as you went throughout your week. I hope you got to look back and reflect on Daniel 1 and all that we covered last week. This week, we're gonna kind of keep going from that and looking at sometimes God's way to follow is not just difficult because He asks us to do difficult things, but because sometimes I don't know what to do. Sometimes we need wisdom, and sometimes we are a little confused in how we go through something. And so that's why this week we're going to be looking at Daniel 2. We're going to keep plugging along, and we see this week our no right is Daniel asks God for wisdom to interpret King Nebuchadnezzar's dream. And we're gonna look at that in Daniel 2. It's one chapter, and that's gonna help us think right. And our think right verse is from James 1:5. We're gonna jump all the way ahead to the New Testament. And James 1:5 says, if any of you lacks wisdom, he should ask God. And I love how simple that is. You ask God. That's all He asks us to do. That's going to help us do right. I will ask God for wisdom. And when we do that, we can feel right. We can feel victorious when we have and we share God's wisdom with others. And so we've got a quick, short little video we're going to look at. We're going to check it out, and we'll meet back here and we'll talk about it some more. All right?
"2 years after rising to the throne of Babylon, King Nebuchadnezzar had a terrible dream. This dream frightened him so much that he couldn't sleep. King Nebuchadnezzar, in anguish and desperate to learn what the dream meant, called in all the wise men known to him to see if any of them could interpret his dream. The wise men came before King Nebuchadnezzar and asked him to tell them about his dream. But the king refused. King Nebuchadnezzar demanded that the wise men first tell him what he dreamed, and then what the dream meant. The king declared, "If you can do this, I will give you great rewards. If not, I will have you put to death." In disbelief of the king's request, the wise men said, "King Nebuchadnezzar, what you ask is impossible. No one can do what you ask. Only a god could tell you your dream." This made King Nebuchadnezzar so angry that he ordered that all his wise men be put to death, including Daniel and his friends Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. When the king's chief soldier, Arioch, came to capture Daniel, he asked Arioch what was going on. Arioch explained the situation, and Daniel went to King Nebuchadnezzar to ask for time to interpret the dream. The king agreed, and Daniel hurried back to see Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego so that they could pray for God's help. That night, God revealed to Daniel the king's dream and its meaning. The next morning, Daniel went to Arioch and said, "Don't execute the wise men of Babylon. I will interpret the king's dream." When Arioch brought Daniel before King Nebuchadnezzar, the troubled, tired king asked Daniel, "Can you tell me what I saw in my dream?" Daniel replied, "No one could tell you this, but there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He showed me your dream and what it means." Daniel told the king, "God showed you the future through your dream. In your dream, you saw a statue with a head of gold, chest and arms of silver, belly and thighs of bronze, legs of iron, and feet of iron mixed with clay. Then a rock smashed the statue. The rock became a mountain that filled the whole earth. You, king, are the head of gold, and every other part of the statue are the kingdoms that will come after you. The rock represents a kingdom that God will establish that will last forever. King Nebuchadnezzar bowed before Daniel and showed him great honor for all that God had spoken through him. The king said, "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings, the one who can reveal the greatest of mysteries." For his service, King Nebuchadnezzar promoted Daniel to a high position and placed him in charge of all the wise men. At Daniel's request, the king also promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to rule over all the provinces of Babylon.
I love that video, and there is a lot that definitely sticks out to me throughout that video about Daniel and him interpreting Nebuchadnezzar's dream. The first thing that I just see and I love is that Daniel and his three buddies, they sought God's wisdom. They kind of looked for it, and they asked God for wisdom right away before they did anything, or before they kind of got in a mess. I know sometimes we kind of do things in our own wisdom or what we think is right a lot of times, and then we wait till there's kind of bad consequences or difficult consequences, kind of difficult things going on around us, and then we'll ask God what to do. But Daniel and Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they right away went to God and wanted wisdom from him to interpret Nebuchadnezzar's dream. Also, after they did it, after Daniel interpreted Nebuchadnezzar's dream, in verse 2, 27 and 28, I want to read something to you. It says this: Daniel replied, "No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries." And I don't know if you caught that or saw what happened, but Daniel doesn't take credit for it. He doesn't go around and saying, "Check out how cool I am," or what I can do. He says, "Nobody can do this. Only God can. There's a God in heaven who can do that." And when he does it, when he does interpret his dream, he gives God the credit. He doesn't go around acting like, "Man, I'm so special," or "I'm the guy," but he points everything back to God, how great God is and how wise God is. And in doing that, it points King Nebuchadnezzar to God. King Nebuchadnezzar doesn't think Daniel's cool. He thinks Daniel's God is cool. And I hope that that's something that people always, that's something that I want to think and live every day, that people don't go, "Oh, Zach," or whatever, but they go, "Man, the God that he follows, that Jesus that he's always talking about must be really, really cool." And even King Nebuchadnezzar, he says this, he says, "Your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings." And he recognized Daniel's God is over all rulers and kingdoms and over all things. And kind of what we talked back a few weeks ago about idols and the gods, that the false gods that they had. But in this, Nebuchadnezzar, he's not a great dude, is going, "Your God's the one. Your God's the guy." And instead of killing Daniel and his three friends like he said he was going to do, he rewards them. He rewards Daniel and his buds, and he puts them high up in his court. And going through all this, I'm thinking the whole time, all of this happened because Daniel was courageous and he asked God for wisdom. And just like our verse, James 1:5 says, "Ask God. If you lack wisdom, ask God." I think a great way to gain wisdom is also by talking to God as you read through his word, talking to other Christians, talking to other your parents, other people who want God's wisdom. I love this whole thing, and the last thing that I'm going to leave you with is in verse 44, and it says this. It says, "In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever." And you might be thinking, how do I be a part of that eternal kingdom, that kingdom that's never going to fall apart? And we know that by placing our trust in Jesus Christ, by believing in what he did on the cross, is how you can be a part of that eternal kingdom that will never perish, that will live eternally, by believing that God lived perfectly, that he sent his son Jesus to live perfectly and to pay for our sins, that we couldn't do it, but that God did through Jesus. And by putting our trust in him, we get to be a part of that eternal kingdom. And how awesome is that, and how great is that? That's why we're so excited about Jesus all the time, because we get to be in that eternal kingdom, and that he loves us enough to do that for us. We've got the Satyrs. I'm going to throw it over to them. They've got a really fun icKids challenge this week. I'm excited to see what's going on with it and see all you guys getting in on it. Make sure you use the hashtag icKids challenge. We love you, praying for you, we miss you. And if you lack wisdom, ask God. All right? Bye, guys.
Hi, welcome to icKids Challenge. This week we learned that King Nebuchadnezzar was having a bad dream, and he really wanted someone to interpret it, so he asked all sorts of people, but no one could. Daniel heard about this, and he and his friends prayed for God's wisdom. And God granted him that wisdom, and he interpreted King Nebuchadnezzar's dream. He gave God all the glory, and even the king praised God. But what can we do for this week's icKids Challenge?
I think I have an idea.
What is it?
Bubbles. We can do bubbles like this thought bubble that I have up here. We can do it, and we're going to show you that just right now.
That sounds great. We're going to go outside, so we'll see you soon.
Well, here's how to make bubbles for this week's icKids Challenge. And remember, when you're making those bubbles, to think of God's wisdom. So what are we going to do to make bubbles this week?
All right, so here's how you can make some homemade bubbles. First of all, you just get a bowl. I've already made some, but I'm going to tell you what's in it. You use 1.5 cups of water,
1.5 cups,
a 1/2 cup of dishwashing soap,
1/2 cup,
and 2 teaspoons of sugar.
2 teaspoons.
All right, you stir it all up, and you got your bubble mix. Now, we haven't had little kids in our house for a long time, so we don't have any bubble wands around here. But did you know that you can blow bubbles through anything that has a hole in it? So I have this little spatula here.
Whoa!
You could use like a whisk. Well,
What if you just spread it? Ooh, look at that.
but we always have to go a little big at icKids Challenge. So now I have this little wand here that I want to show you how to make, and then I'll show you what it does.
With chopsticks?
Well, you can use 2 sticks of any kind. So you can go grab sticks right out of your yard. And then you just need a long piece of yarn or string. So what you're going to do is you're going to tie the string to one of the chopsticks. And then you tie it, you give it like maybe, I don't know, 1 foot, and then you tie it on the other chopstick or stick from your yard, whichever.
Is that just yarn you're using?
I'm just using yarn, and I would double knot it. And then you take the long string and you tie the other end to your other chopstick or stick, whatever. So you have like a big hole, right? And let me show you what it does. Put it in your mixture. Oh, I got it a little tangled here. There we go.
There it goes.
Put it in your mixture, and then you blow a bubble.
Oh my goodness, look at that one.
Woo! Can't wait to see your bubbles on hashtag icKids Challenge.
Have fun.